I'm Meaghan Chitwood, and you are tuning in to From Overlooked to Consistently Booked. And again, today we have Jason Sanders with Comfort Masters. We're going to talk about training teams to get consistency and figuring out how to bring on people you trust and keep that trust alive. So thank you so much for continuing. You dropped some great nuggets in the last episode and want to continue that. So let's talk about how you train your team to get the consistent output you want from them.
So first of all, business, there's two schools of thought here. The one is to hire a bunch of trainees and train each person up as you go. And there's a lot of merit to that, but I chose the other school, which was to hire experience and try to break bad habits if they got them.
Yeah.
Because trust me, HVAC service industry is full of some bad habits. So the very first thing that we do is I ride along, with my guy, and I want you to watch me interact with the customer. This is how I want you to park. A lot of it's about presentation. I want to make a customer feel good at their home. So you park here, let them see our vehicle, let them see you in your uniform, and you knock on the door, you got your tool bag. That's as much about being ready to do the job as it is about conveying a message to the customer that we're professionals.
Yeah.
We're not going to just show up and sneak a beer while we're fixing your air conditioner.
Yeah.
We're here to work, The other thing is that we do have to break those bad habits because, they're dug in. Old habits die hard, they say. And so we bring them in and we say, hey, I'm going to role play with you. And I want you to talk, I want you to give me some answers how you would respond to this. One of the other things that we do is I kind of audit the calls to start with. I'll go behind them. Why did you replace this part? Show me the old part. That sort of thing. Why didn't you talk about this with the customer? Why did you talk about that? And I just hear them out. And I basically come at them with, this is how I need you to see my business. I also have a 10-minute presentation that they all get. It basically tells them, this is why I started my own business. This is the vision that I have for growing. And I really need you to adopt that.
Yes,
vision.
I love that. That's big time culture building of I need you. And if I can see that you love what you're hearing from all of that, then I have a much higher trust level that you're going to want to do things based on the vision we ultimately have. That's awesome. Another
thing that we do is, we're going to make mistakes. There's going to be calls that we did something wrong or we missed something. Anytime that happens, I bring all the guys in. Nobody's in trouble. Hey, this is what went wrong on the call. I want everybody to know why we missed it and how, we can avoid missing it in the future. If the technician makes a mistake, the technician is the one who has to fix this mistake. He may go back with somebody with more experience, but they don't get off the hook. I know some of my competitors, if a misdiagnosis is made, that guy's somewhere else and we'll just send someone else behind it. And so there's no real incentive to stop.
So you're building in self-accountability. You have to solve we'll help you solve the problem, but you have to go and execute on the solution.
That's a military
really
thing.
Cool.
So in the military, they can't take your money, they can't fire you, they take your time.
Yeah.
And I still have to pay the guys, but in a way, if you make a mistake, it's not necessarily about a punishment and taking your time as much as it is. That's how we did it in the military. It worked, and I believe it'll work here too. And so far, so good.
Yeah. I always tell people, if I tell you to do A, B, and C, and you don't do A, B, and C, then that's your fault, right? But if I tell you go use your best judgment, right? You're using your best judgment in the call, and you don't get it right, I always say, I'll help you bury the bodies, right? I'll always help you get out of it. But I love the accountability piece of this is how we fix it and go fix it, because I think the learning becomes much more ingrained in the culture of that is really.
Yeah. Well, there's a belief that I have. I've worked at places where if you make a mistake, they're looking for an excuse to fire you, it seems like sometimes. I believe if you have a technician who makes a really bad mistake and you fire him and you get another technician who's never made that mistake, you messed up, because the guy who made that mistake once will probably never do it again.
Absolutely.
And the guy who you just brought in who's never made that mistake, it's just a matter of time
before it happens. It's funny. It's like the answer of the test question that you got wrong. I can tell you the one question I got wrong in my driving test when I was 16.
Yep.
Right? I'll never forget it because I had to go through the falling down to actually ultimately build that back up. So I want to just summarize. So you ride along, you let them see exactly what it looks like with you. Then do you ride along with them and watch them do it?
Yeah.
Or kind of what's your process?
We try to do that. It depends on when we hire the person. If I'm being honest, it may not happen. It may be that we hired somebody in the absolute disaster week and
Yeah.
there's no ride-alongs.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to do that later. But yeah, we generally will follow up and I'll go along with them. I don't tell the customer that I'm the owner because then the customer just wants to deal with me. I just show up as the helper. I'll carry the tool bag, try to look like the junior person and let them run the call. And then when the call's done, hey, here's where you got right. Here's where I think you could improve. Let's keep moving forward. My guys, we don't put them under, we don't have quotas. We don't have sales goals. What we do have is, guys, this is how much money you need to average per call to stay in business. This is how much money you need to average in call where we're making good money. But we don't put that pressure and goals on them because, well, one, I think it creates an incentive to be dishonest.
Yeah.
And for two, I think that by not putting that pressure, you just get a better experience. We don't teach scripts. What we really teach is if you've got a diagnosis and you'll just tell the customer what it is and try to bring it down to their level. If you've got an engineer, lay it on them as heavy as you can lay it on them. But not everybody's an engineer. Some people don't want to hear all that.
Yeah.
They just want as they say, you got to put the grass down there where the cows can get it or they won't get it.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. We try to, meet the customer on their level, make sure they understand what the problem is, what their options are, and you will have a positive customer experience almost every time.
Well, and we were talking a little bit on one of our lessons about kind of the long game, right? That if you build that kind of trust with people in the long game, those customers are going to come back to you and tell their friends about the experience they had with you rather than others. So do you think, that is, right? It's better than trying to replace the unit.
That's actually one of our training things that we go through. One of the habits we have to break from new guys, most of these companies out here are just grinding you. Why didn't you sell a unit today? Why didn't you sell a unit? For us, I would rather fix your unit over the next several years a few times and then replace it. Because once I've replaced your unit, I've kind of lost you as a customer except for maintenances.
Right.
But if I can keep your unit running for 5 or 6 or 7 years longer than maybe a different company would have kept it going for, and you've been happy with the service we provided, what are the chances that we're going to get first crack at replacing your unit too?
Absolutely.
So it's really more business than just replacing air conditioners. That's the way we see it.
And I love the idea of, hey, we're going to try and limp along for a few more years because it's not quite time yet. I just think we've also talked about walking away from the immediate sale of the new unit to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So how do you, because that's a hard habit to break, going from the short-term memory to the short game to the long game. How have you been able to successfully do that with your company?
Honestly, when you start out, it's kind of a necessity. If you're a one-man show, changing out a unit's a two-man job. And it's easier, to not have to bring in a helper temporarily, change out the unit, for one. For two, one of the reasons that I left the other company that I was at, I changed a fan motor on a ladies' air conditioner. That was about 12 years old. But we're talking about, this was what I would call a low-mileage air conditioner, okay? A young guy who works out all the time, who likes to keep his house basically like a meat locker.
Yeah.
Versus his neighbor who lives in the same basic house, but she likes her house a comfortable 78 degrees for her. Her air conditioner at 10 years has got a lot less use than his air conditioner does at 10 years. So we don't just go at an air conditioner and say, what's the age of it, and we mark it for a replacement or not, okay? We look at the functionality of the air conditioner and how's it working, how's it performing. So that's criteria number one.
I have never had an HVAC person ask us how we use our unit. That's an awesome thought process.
We generally don't have to ask. You can generally walk in the house and know.
Yeah, right, that's true.
But just take, for instance, the upstairs air conditioners, in people's hair. Is anybody upstairs? No.
Yeah.
That air conditioner is a low mileage unit.
Yep.
You go to walk in their house and they're complaining, man, I like to keep it 68. That's an air conditioner that's been earning its keep.
Yeah.
So if you go to that thing and you got a fan motor that's gone out and the compressor sounds bad, and it's 12 years old, that's the guy you want to have a little bit more serious conversation about replacement. You got an elderly woman, maybe she's a widow, and I hardly ever even turn it on.
Yeah.
And she's got a bad fan motor. Her compressor probably sounds fine.
Yeah.
We don't talk to her. So I hate to use the word. Sometimes we have to twist people's arms a little bit because what happens is you know that nobody wants to replace their air conditioner.
Right.
But what I also don't want is to put a new fan motor on it and then have to come back 6 months later and replace it anyway.
Yeah.
So we try to make sure the customer understands what they're getting into if they're going to roll the dice and make the repair. But the easiest part of that, we give the customer the choice.
The option.
It's their choice. If they want to replace it, we're happy to do it. If they want to fix the fan motor and take that risk, we're happy to do that too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And how you've taught all of them to basically follow that process and do that. And then reinforced it with how they are reviewed, compensated, and all of those kinds of things as well. So next time, we're going to talk about the systems that you have used in order to make the business run, right? Because you got to have systems once you've gotten there. And so we're excited to continue this conversation next week with you. So thanks for tuning in this week. Check out next week's podcast to continue to do a deeper dive with Jason. We'll see you next week on From Overlooked to Consistently Booked.